Why would Abraham debate with God over the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and not even appear to try and save Isaac? Is there some lesson here that we're missing? Last May, we welcomed Rabbi David Greenstein to our community as one of our scholar-in-residences. He demonstrated that wonderful tradition that we continually turn the text again and again to discover new insights, new ideas, new meanings within it. Using the Zohar as one of the angles that he discovered, he brought new insight, at least to me, a different perspective on this text, one that I had never even considered. He suggested that maybe Isaac, in this text, represents all of Abraham's fears. By killing Isaac, he was destroying his fears. Only then was Abraham able to move forward. Consider for a moment what it means to kill our fears. What might we be able to accomplish if we weren't frozen, paralyzed, afraid to move ahead because of our fears? What fears paralyze us? What fears stop us dead in our tracks? And what do? How do we respond? What should we do? What are we afraid of? How often have we heard that fear of failure keeps one from even trying? It's one of the main plots in so many of those books and movies that we read and see. Two people who secretly love each other, but almost lose each other because each is afraid to show or express their true feelings, thinking they'll be rejected. Who here knows someone, or is themselves, stuck in some lousy professional situation because they're afraid of change? Maybe we are underpaid or the work conditions are horrendous, but we're afraid of losing a job that we have because we don't know if there might be something better out there for us. So we don't speak up. We become so set in our ways that we don't believe we can succeed in the next level. We stop trying to better our situation. Over 20 years ago in Denver, I heard a great speaker, and I promise you I would tell you his name if I could only remember it, but I can't. But I remember his talk. He shared with us his role as a therapist for troubled teens. He described dealing with these kids who were afraid to fail and were so afraid of something, he said it was almost as if they were clinging to the edge of a cliff by their fingertips. He said his role was to very lovingly, very carefully lift up each one of their fingertips, one by one, as they came closer and closer to feeling like they were about to fall off that cliff. And as he symbolically pried off that last finger, and as they left that edge, they discovered that what they were gripping onto was not a huge cliff, but just a small little drop. Not a matter of hundreds of feet, but a matter of inches. Their fears were unrealized. What they thought was going to be a disaster turned out to be okay. He helped them understand a wonderful quote that President Franklin D. Roosevelt taught us all: the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. I remember my own struggle when I was first ordained. I was the new assistant rabbi at Congregation Emmanuel in Denver. And the senior rabbi, Steve Foster, was a man of short stature, but an amazing presence, charismatic, dynamic, and in my opinion, scary as all heck. I was afraid that I was going to mess up. Whenever he would call me into his office, I was sure, I was going to get in trouble. I must have done something wrong. And then once a month, he would invite me out to this wonderful Chinese buffet for lunch. we both really liked that buffet. I won't tell you how much weight we put on eating at that buffet, but I will tell you before each of those lunches, I was a wreck. I was so concerned about what was he going to tell me? What was he going to scold me with? My boss. What had I done wrong? What missteps had I taken? It probably took about a dozen lunches before I stopped being afraid of those lunches and came to appreciate the good food and his support. The purpose of those lunches were to teach me, to guide me, to mentor me. Every now and then he would point out maybe a mistake I had taken, but it was only to make me a better rabbi. Always after the lunches I wondered, why was I so frightened? He turned out to be one of my best teachers ever and a good friend, and is still my mentor. But I was so afraid back then, afraid of failure. As we enter this new year, it's time to ask ourselves, what fears are preventing us from bettering our own lives? Recently, I met with a young couple in my office, helping them plan their marriage. The groom is Jewish, the bride is Christian. Although I was not going to officiate their wedding, one of their relatives was going to do that, they'd asked me to do some premarital counseling with them and help them work on their ceremony, which I gladly agreed to help them with. That connected to her Christian roots, and all the time she'd spent with her fiancé in his home, she came to love their sense of Jewish family, the values, and she really liked all the holidays they were celebrating. She loved Passover. I turned to the groom and I said, have you ever talked to her about exploring more in the realm of Judaism? And he said, no, I'm afraid she'll get upset. She'll think I'm being pushy. And in front of him, I turned to her and I said, would you like to study Judaism with me? And she said, I'd love to. I turned to the groom and said, do you mind if she studies Judaism with me? He responded the way you just did. He laughed. He said, no, I'd love it. And as it turns out, in a couple of months, she's going to start studying with me after the wedding with the plans of converting. She wanted to be Jewish, but he was afraid to suggest that the religion he grew up with, the religion he loved, the religion that he celebrated, he was afraid to suggest to her, maybe you might want to explore sharing it with me. What don't we tell our partners because we're afraid of their response? Maybe they're just waiting for us to ask them to join us in whatever we love and whatever we're doing. The bride turned to the groom in my office and told him she'd love to explore his Jewish roots and probably become Jewish. And I'm pretty sure she will. Our fears keep us from doing so many things that might help us or those around us grow. Your little children have not yet learned to be afraid. They fall down and get right back up. Maybe it's because they don't have far to fall. But they don't seem afraid. They make all kinds of mistakes and they don't worry about it. They don't mind being corrected. It's how they learn as children. Eventually they learn that I run down the street becomes I ran down the street. But as adults, we're afraid to make those grammatical errors. Learning a second language becomes more challenging. We're afraid to speak aloud, fearing we might say something incorrectly. We've forgotten how to let it flow and not worry about our mistakes. I understand it. When I was living in Israel, I learned more Hebrew from children I was working with at Aline Hospital for handicapped children than from most of the adults. Because around the adults, I was really nervous. Around the kids, they laughed at my mistakes and corrected me and made me feel good about it. I became a class clown with little children and learned from them in the process. And my Hebrew is getting gooder and gooder. Next month, I'm going to start another adult B'nai Mitzvah class. This will be an opportunity for those who have never had a chance to study Hebrew or become a bar bat mitzvah to maybe take that step. Information about these classes have been in the shofar and will be in October shofar, which you're getting now. One individual approached me and said they were afraid to take the class because they knew so little about Hebrew and so little about Judaism that they would look really stupid in class. How many of us know so little about Hebrew or so little about Judaism that we sometimes look stupid? It's okay. When I'm with my ultra-Orthodox colleagues, I know I sound and look stupid compared to them. But I don't let it paralyze me. Sometimes they teach me, but I don't let them judge me in a negative way. If they want to do that, that's up to them. But it doesn't reflect on my soul and on me. Each of us has a chance to learn. Each of us has a chance to grow. Some of us didn't have that opportunity to become a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah when we were children. We might not have been Jewish, or lived in a Jewish neighborhood, or grown up in a traditional community. We might have learned very little, or forgotten most of what we learned because we stopped when we were bar bat mitzvah. And for some of us, that was a long time ago. And so, just because we don't know shouldn't stop us. The truth is, everyone here in the synagogue is ignorant about some subjects. Don't ask me any calculus questions. I won't get any answers correct. And if you ask me about the Bronze Age or the Stone Age, won't do very well. And if my daughter and I ever go scuba diving, which happens periodically, I come up and I say, "Did you see that green fish?" And she'll give it some scientific name, and I'll say, "Yeah, the green one." I'll know it's pretty, and I know I like it, but she knows the name of it. And she knows what it eats and where it lives and all about it, and she'll teach me. I don't mind learning. All of us have plenty of room to grow. When one of my colleagues, Rabbi Herschel Jaffe, had to battle cancer, he shared on his blog, "Confront your fears." He writes that one of his congregants asked him, "What do you do in the middle of the night when no one is with you and you're scared?" He answered, "I told him, don't try to run away and hide under the blanket. Sit up in bed and let all the nightmarish things happen right before your eyes. See everything that terrifies you. Then, when you have all of this in front of you, acknowledge your fears. You have a right to feel frightened and depressed about those awful things that have happened. But then realize that despite it all, you are still very much alive. Kita imadi. Do not fear because God is with us. How might we be different if we know God is with us? Do you remember, have you ever seen that young child who suddenly starts to panic because they do not know where mommy or daddy is? But the moment when a parent returns or appears, everything is okay. God is that ultimate parent. If only we can accept that God is at our side, how much safer we would feel in almost every situation. We gather in our synagogue during this Holy Day season to strengthen our connection to our traditions, to one another, to our ancestors, and to God. I hope and pray that each person who does not feel God's presence in their lives finds that connection. May those who already sense God in their lives strengthen that relationship. Knowing that God is with us, the challenges in our lives become more manageable. Our liturgy reminds us that God is our rock. When we find ourselves in turbulent waters, may we remember to use God as our anchor. These are scary times. With unrest in the world around us, with upheaval, school shootings, violence in our communities, there is much to fear. I believe in turning to God, we can find strength to face all these challenges and search for ways to conquer the many problems all around us. May this new year bring us restored faith, and with it, a strength, a resolve to move forward. Chazak v'amatz. May 5775 be a year filled with God's blessing, with security and strength. Amen.